Hi everyone, my name is Larissa Peixoto Gomes. I am a political scientist in Brazil. I am, however, job hunting in Europe. So, just letting you all know. And I want to thank the PSA and ECN for doing this, for giving us this opportunity. And, 2020 has been a rough year, and it keeps coming. It keeps throwing things at us, but we got this. And I wish we could all be together and having snacks. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen this year. So, let's start this presentation. Thank you all for watching. So, today I'm going to talk about one of the results from my PhD dissertation. And I researched women's substantive representation in national parliaments. And it had several levels, including analyzing institutional affordances that enabled or hindered actions on behalf of women. And which actions were those, and what is acting on behalf of women in the first place. So I came to this realization on hegemonic feminist discourses, and that's what I want to talk about today. So the cases were Brazil, UK, and Sweden, and they were part of this broader research, and they were selected on a most different approach. Hang on, I can't go back. Okay, so they were selected on a most different approach. First, it was the number of women in parliament in these countries, and then it was their electoral systems. And then I went to a number of other variables, but ended up with these three countries. So because each country is so different, this allowed for an analysis of which legislative actions MPs have at their disposal and how they use them. So for this, I created a legislative data set with data between 2000 and 2018 and interviewed MPs and legislative consultants. So the basic premise of this dissertation is what is representation. And it comes with many heavy conceptualizations, beginning with Pitkin's concepts and how they're related, and several models that were designed afterwards. And basically, this is my idea of it and how I perceive it to be. So these are, related and reinforcing, and I don't want to, just be on this too long. But essentially, this means that there are several things that can be considered a successful action in Parliament. And success is context dependent. So success can be passing a law, that's our basic traditional view, but it can also be passing an internal regulation that changes how a chamber of deputies, in the case of Brazil, or House of Parliament, is perceived or used, but it's also getting a budget amendment, it's being able to make a speech, is writing a question, but it is also having respect, having access to leadership positions, and when you do speak or when you do propose something, you don't have backlash, you're not attacked for your actions. So this also means that risk is often in the topic, not the action, and that is subjective to the person who is taking it. So if, for instance, if a white man is talking about abortion, the backlash might not even be there if it is a woman of color. So the data, as I mentioned, is these legislative actions and the interviews with MPs and legislative consultants. The result highlighted here comes from this holistic analysis of the data. I look through I did a content analysis of the data and also used in vivo to sort of confirm my manual checks, and a pattern of how women's substantive representation emerged in each country, how substantive representation is presented. So this success includes not generating backlash, but also being co-opted by other actors. Now, that a little bit further in the results. So a few topics emerged. So there are, core topics, and they are separated into how they are defined and talked about. So you have women, you have girls, and to a much lesser extent, there are discussions on men and boys. And then you have a large grouping of family discussions and children, and this is true for each 3 countries. Then you have discussions on parental leave, violence, intersectionality. Then you have to consider ethnic, racial, and religious minorities, and this is different in each country, obviously. And you have discussions on LGBTQI people. Labor and work are very context defined. And then you have discussions of gender itself, and then you have reproductive rights. These mean that there are certain policies that are also more salient. So in Brazil, most of the policies that you're going to find are on domestic violence and women's health. And in Sweden, they're on parental leave and labor market. And in the UK, you have female genital mutilation, workplace equality, harassment, and pensions. And Sweden and the UK also have an international affairs and assimilation of people who are foreigners or who are not white and not Protestant. Okay, so these are some of the in vivo charts. So you have here woman. It's definitely a word that is, of course, it is going to be very salient. Pariu is gave birth. So women and birth are very connected in Brazil. 340 is the number of the domestic violence law. So this is also very relevant. And this is the hierarchy chart. So you can see that woman is up here along with violence and health. So here in sexual, you also have a lot of ideas of sexual violence. So for Sweden, it's similar. You have women up here and then parental here. Gender is also very salient, something that doesn't appear in Brazil that much. And then when you look at the hierarchy chart, gender equality is the one that appears the most. And then in the UK, again, women, of course, that is the topic of discussion. But then you also have district and region and family. So it is it does make it a bit more clear that this is a majoritarian system. But then when you look at the hierarchy chart, you have work really high up here, which is very interesting. And then female is the key word that's used most often. They use the keyword females, which is interesting. So the conclusion is that the hegemonic feminist discourse is a framework on which representatives of women may choose to present legislative actions on behalf of their constituents, depending on their strategy. This can be something that is thought out or that is just ingrained. Now, most often for feminist actors, it is thought out, and for conservative actors, so for backlash actors, it is also something that is thought out. Similar to, there's an example with a pool in Sweden, and they had set aside times for women only twice a week, and an MP thought that this was regressive, because why would you need women-only times? But when I looked it up, this was especially thought for Muslim women who can't use the pool if it's not for women only. And so it was definitely using a discourse that is hegemonic in Sweden, being gender equality, to sort of act against immigration, to act against people who are not white, to act against people who are Muslim. So in Brazil, that discourse takes the shape of women's rights. So you can't use the word gender, and it can get a little paternalistic. In Sweden, the frame is gender equality, which makes it much harder to talk about domestic violence. And in the UK, the majority of that discourse is predicated on liberal feminism. So it's very much focused on individuals and women who do it all, and being equal to men in the same context of the UK and as it is now, of capitalism and liberal democracy. So it does present itself, this feminist discourse, this hegemonic feminist discourse, presents itself differently in each country because it must conform to each cultural, political, and institutional framework it finds. But it is there. It is something that each country is likely to have in order, because it facilitates discussions. And so this is something that I found in these three countries that are very different, but it is present, and it's something that I think might be found in other countries once we study them. And yeah, that's all I had. I really appreciate this opportunity and hope to see you all in the future. Thank you all very much.